So, hello, Catherine. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Kelly. So nice to be here. Sure. So my name is Catherine Ewing. I am a women's psychotherapist and transformational coach, and I'm here in Connecticut in the United States. I have been sort of a student and a passionate advocate for women's empowerment and healing since I was literally in my teens when I was politically active and that sort of thing. And so I work with women to really help heal any barriers to them stepping into their the highest expression of their soul in this lifetime. And I really, as we talked about earlier, I really believe that we're in a point in time now where it's absolutely crucial to be healing this wound to the feminine for individually and collectively, so that, as individuals and as part of a community, women can step forward and really be a powerful influence and factor for change in a world that has been so out of balance with that toxic, unhealthy masculine. So that's all. The rest will come out as we speak, but that sounds like a good place to
Yeah.
start.
So it sounds very spiritual, what you've just said there, but I'm guessing that there's some practical stuff there as well that you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, this has been a very long journey for me. I was raised Catholic, so I love some of the ritual and the mysticism of Catholicism, not the dogma, the man-made stuff so much. And about 30 years ago, I was given a little shove by the universe, thank you very much, to start back on a more spiritual, metaphysical, and even energy focused path for myself. And I've integrated that over the years, all of that into my work as a psychotherapist. I have a very sort of non-clinical, untraditional, I even hesitate to use the word psychotherapist because I think people have an idea of what that is in their mind. And if there's a range of psychotherapists from very clinical to super alternative, I'd be really leaning on this end, where I really work a lot with energy. I'm trained in lots of different kinds of energy healing modalities. I have a master's in divinity in spiritual peacemaking, but it's mostly based on the work of Yeshua and Magdalene and St. Francis of Assisi and Lady Clare. So it's very much about masculine and feminine and peace and love and all the good things. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm guessing there's a lot of intuition in that. And so a few years ago, well, quite a few years ago now, I think it was about 8 years ago, I did some Reiki training because I just found that really powerful.
Mhm.
I had a job where I was being bullied at work, and and the way I responded to the bullying was that I couldn't make a mistake, and I just worked harder and harder and harder so that I could avoid them finding anything to criticize, but they found it anyway. And I ended up leaving that
This
job,
bully's gonna bully.
and someone gave me some Reiki, and it was just so powerful. Like, I'd never had it before. Like, I'd seen and heard about it a little bit, but I had all these colors, and I could feel the energy moving, and it was just really, really,
Yeah. Well, we hadn't talked about this earlier, but Reiki is one of the first things that I did, that I pursued on that spiritual path, because when I went into the psychotherapy field after about, almost 15 years in very grassroots social work, right? Sexual assault, domestic violence, child protective services, union organizing, again, just empowerment for women. And I was called, if you will, got a little kick to go into private practice as a psychotherapist. And it wasn't long after I was in the practice that I realized that traditional talk therapy was really not, it didn't feel fulfilling for me. I felt like I sort of almost had to have the answers for people, and I didn't get this. Well, it's not only that I didn't get the sense, but I wasn't able to go as deeply with people into the real healing, and not like, well, how was your week? Great. Did you have a fight with your mother? No. I really wanted to dive into the core trauma and be healing that stuff. And that's when I said, I need to find some other ways of working. And around that same time, I had been, well, introduced to some people, and the one woman was the first person who I took therapeutic touch, because it was
yeah.
through the nurses, right? So, and you would work in the field because I couldn't touch people as a psychotherapist. But then I quickly moved on to Reiki and, within a year or so became a Reiki master. And I did a lot of Reiki for a long time. And in my experience of it, Reiki was like a door opener. It was like having Reiki or being attuned to Reiki. And again, I'm getting floods of energy rushing through me, which is for me, it's the universe saying, yeah, you're speaking truth. Was really so yesterday was a portal day. 12/12 was a portal. Reiki is like a portal to me, as when you step through the Reiki portal, so many other things in your life open up. And that was 1999. So it was a long time ago. And, I have continued to learn and grow and bring other practices, modalities, mine and other people's, into the work. So it's really been a ongoing growth journey for me. And then I bring that to the clients that I work with. And the most recent addition to that was just this past year becoming a reader of the Akashic Records, which was something that always interested me. And I tried it on my own a few times and, wasn't really being very successful at it.
I've not heard of that. It sounds complicated.
The Akashic Records?
Heard of that before.
It's the Akashic Record is basically the book of each soul's journey from the moment it was breathed into existence. So when you go into the records, you have access to someone's soul path.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is something, it's not like a physical book then, it's like a...
No, it's in the ethers. It's,
right, okay. So it's something you access through Reiki or some sort of... Yeah. Okay, now I get it.
It's another way that we use our
big room where you've got this big book and you see into people's souls, but obviously not.
Yeah. But you know what? We were talking about connections before and how things are all integrated. When I first went to college, I went for library science because I love books. I love reading. I love information. I love research. I love figuring things out and then sharing it with people. And now here I am in the Akashic Library. It's like the best library of all times, right? And again, just those connections, the following the breadcrumbs of life and what interested me, 50 years ago, now has its own version, a higher, more elevated. It's not only digitized, it's quantified.
Yeah, because you said earlier before we started recording that you've done a lot of different, what could be perceived as different jobs, but actually there's a thread that goes through all of them, and that is healing women mainly.
Yeah, it's healing and empowerment. When I first started, I was much more of a social activist. I was the head of the women's caucus in my graduate school, was an activist in the marching and I know you were going to some marches, but for the Equal Rights Amendment. And back in the day when I was doing it, it was in order to get access to abortion. Now we're on the other side of that completely here in the United States. But yeah, as a teen and in my 20s, I was already, sort of agitating and activating. And, I gave the speech for the Women's Caucus at my graduation for my, from graduate school. And I was really quite vocal and identified as, a feminist early on. And it has changed form over the years. Now it does have a more spiritual.
I was going to say, I don't really like the word feminist because it brings up connotations of all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I tend to say women's rights because it's more neutral, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I know, even like, when we say God, everybody's got their own version of that. But back in the 70s, when we were marching for equal rights and for, women's rights, we called ourselves feminists. And of course, that movement we were talking about before about balancing the masculine and the feminine energy, even though it was a movement by and for women, it was very masculine in its energy. We were fighting against, right? pushing against. And we thought, anyway, and it was pretty exclusive. It was primarily white women. It was not, so it had its issues, but at the time, that's what we had, right?
Yeah.
And then you learn from that.
Yeah. You build on what's come before.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, the word feminist, it sort of, there's all these negative connotations to it as well as positive. So yeah, some women like it, some women don't. But
yeah, but it's funny that, and I don't want to go off too much on a tangent here, but we talk about negative connotations, and I do believe that the prevailing culture has a lot to do with how something gets identified. Like,
yeah,
I was talking about today is Friday the 13th, right? And typically Friday the 13th is, it's black cats and it's bad luck and it's blah, blah, blah. But before the days of the patriarchy, Friday the 13th was a sacred, high holy day
yeah,
for the priestesses and, what we would call witches.
yeah.
Friday was the day of the goddess. 13 was the number that, represented the cycles of the year and all of that. And they spent the day in prayer and meditation and conjuring in a positive way, right?
I think
Honoring.
there's lots of words like that have taken on a negative meaning, but actually are very female.
Yep. There's a book called The Left Hand Path of the Feminine or of the Goddess. And, there's a whole, at least a chapter on all of the ways in which language and even how, the holy days of the earth-based, it doesn't even have to be goddesses and priestesses, but, whether it was the Druids or just earth-based religion, how their holy days and holidays were stripped away. They were given new names and the story was changed a little bit to typically make men the heroes and women either the villains or the, one who had to be rescued. But if you look at the stories and see the change in the language, you can see, oh, this is the same holy day that was celebrated by the matriarchal people.
Yeah.
Communities. Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? How things are shifted away from what they did mean to be given a new meaning.
Yeah. And, that was then the beginning that was when we first started to see tools of war, not just tools of agriculture or tools to make, pottery or whatever, but tools of war that were used to take over and power over. And again, I don't want to get too much into this aspect of it, but it really was where this patriarchal system that we're now in the process of dismantling. Thank you, goddess. It looks terrible and it looks like, all kinds of crazy things are happening, but it is the dismantling of this system that has been in place for so long that has pushed us almost to the edge of, I would say, action,
Yeah. So before we started recording, I was talking about how, well, you mentioned that the news you can't trust the news anymore, but you used to be able to, and how, well, and then I said that there's lots of evil in the world that's coming up, and it's been revealed, and it's probably always been there, but it's becoming more visible, and it feels like we're going through a change, which can feel quite frightening, and you can, if you're not careful, live in that fear of the unknown and how it's going to affect you. And if everything implodes like it looks like it's going to all the systems that we don't know what's coming next. I mean, that is quite frightening in a way.
Yeah.
But it's also exciting, and it's a fertile place as well, isn't it?
Oh, I love that. I love that languaging. Yes. I have a lot of compassion for people who are not yet waking up and they're just seeing what's happening and living in a state of fear and scarcity around that. And I understand, it isn't always choice. People are born into situations, that lend themselves to that being in more of a survival space. But I feel so blessed and grateful that, it was, again, probably 30 years ago when I had just started being a psychotherapist and realized I needed more tools than what traditional talk therapy was offering to help my clients go deeper into their own healing that started me right on the path of Reiki and then energy work and understanding metaphysics and spirituality more. And I came to understand that we were in this time of great awakening and that there would be a point as the energies built and as more people woke up where systems would start to collapse. And as I mentioned to you, I was like, how is that going to happen? Like, how can everything, the educational system, the financial system, the churches, all the institutions, the politics that we've come to depend on and build our world around, what happens when all of that collapses? It'll be like chaos. And then in some point in COVID, I went, "Ooh, we are living it." And so I, as I was saying, feel grateful that I have a higher perspective on this. I understand that we're going through this, passing through the eye of a needle, right? As one of my spiritual teachers would say, or being in the spin cycle of a washing machine where everything that's no longer truth can't hold, it's spinning off and it's chaotic in the meantime. But if a person doesn't have anything to hold on to, like, okay, we're going through this for a reason, like there's a higher purpose here. I trust in the higher order. I trust in divine timing. Even though this makes no sense to me right now, I believe that spirit is everywhere in everything. And so I have to believe that here as well. Like I'm speaking specifically about the recent election in the United States, that spirit is everywhere. It took me a long time to come to the belief that everything happens for me, not to me, right? Everything is happening for me. And so if I really believe that, I can't pick and choose when that's true. It's either true or it's not true.
Yeah.
So that gives me hope. And as we move through this place that we are in the cosmos, where more and more photon light is being pushed down onto the earth, and now with Pluto moving into Aquarius, the sign of death and rebirth and resurrection, with its intense light for the next 20 years, just as you said, what has been in the dark is all being pushed up to the surface, and that's individually. It happens within each of us. It's like our septic tank. We got to get that stuff out of there so we can make room for something else, and collectively. So this is what we're seeing, that the power and the pressure of the light now is so strong that it's forcing everything that's been in the dark to be seen for what it is, to be revealed so it can be healed. But it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. I think that word fertile is quite, I don't know what, profound maybe. It means so many different things. You can think of it in so many different ways.
Yeah.
It's from fertility, things grow, and yeah.
Yes.
But
I'm thinking of, I use the analogy of sort of like, I use this with my clients sometime, like their internal septic tank, like we have to get that out. And it's like the compost. It's like everything that has been composted then becomes the fertile ground. In fact, I think I used those same words. I did a TED Talk a number of years ago. Whatever has been composted from the past becomes the fertile ground.
And that's from death, isn't it?
Yeah.
Death builds new
birth. And that's the feminine, cycles of death and rebirth. The goddesses, the divine feminine, have always recognized the cycles of death and birth as just a natural, I think most early cultures did, because it was just so much a part of their community life.
So are these perspectives that you've got now on the way the world is this something that you've learned over time? Like the way you see the death and rebirth and the masculine and the feminine, or is it something that you tapped into quite a long time ago, early in your career? Or early in your life?
Yeah. The thing that's sort of stirring in me, Kelly, when you ask that question, is probably 20 years ago, I had some reading or something. It may even have been longer. It may have been. So when I was 53, 23, I stepped out of my 30-year marriage. It was not an easy decision. I have 3 children who were then 21, 16, and 14. Not an easy time to step away. But over a period of years, it had become pretty clear to me that the relationship that I was in was not the relationship that was going to allow me to continue to grow and be who I needed to be, or I came here to be. I shouldn't say needed to be. And in a couple of those readings, people said something about balancing your masculine and feminine energy. And honestly, I didn't know what the heck they were talking about. I was like, what do you mean? I'm like in a girl's body. Like, and I grew up with 6 brothers, which I think in my case is interesting because, I wanted to keep up with the boys. So I was a pretty driven, masculine, like I had a lot of masculine, the doing and the being and the striving and the getting ahead, So it took me a lot of years to really understand what was even being asked of me in this balancing the masculine and the feminine. And I was in it was a coach's training. I had been trained as a dream coach, not dreams, nighttime dreams, but following your dreams. And then a couple of years after that, went to a training with that same coach teacher to take what we learned to do individually with people and apply it in groups. So I was in this 5-day long group coaching training. And one of the guests was a guy named Tim Kelly, who had written a book called True Purpose. And he led us through an exercise in meeting our trusted guides, I think he called them, trusted authorities. I don't know, some word. He used slightly different language. But in this meditation, we're in a room of 30 people or something, maybe even more. And he's bringing us through this meditation. And I had the experience with my eyes closed of feeling 2 powerful energies come up behind me on either side of me. And I knew it was Mary Magdalene and Yeshua, which is the name that I use for Jesus, the Aramaic name that I use for Jesus. And I knew they were standing right behind me. I felt as though if I turned around and touched them, there would be physical beings there. And to make a long story short, they basically told me that their mission, the mission that they were assigning me, should I choose to accept it, from the old show Mission Impossible. I don't know if you remember that.
I love that. I love the films, actually. You call them movies, I call them films. Tom Cruise, yeah, I love them.
Was that what I came here to do, and not only me, but as part of a collective of people whose souls had chosen to be on the earth at this time for this big event, right? We wanted to be on the front lines of this, was to balance the masculine and feminine energy on the planet and anchor the energy of the divine feminine that had been, I was going to say lost, but lost seems like that just sort of went away. It was destroyed. It was annihilated. Millions of women and some men were killed for being witches or druids or whatever. And so to re-anchor that energy of the divine feminine back onto the planet so that we could begin to come into more balance and have some hope of creating a world that is more equitable, right? More balanced, more cooperative, more intuitive, more inclusive, all of those things. And they gave me this mission. And I have to say, I really didn't know what the heck they were talking about. I was like, I don't remember this being in my high school aptitude test, like anchoring.
No, I can't imagine that being at school.
Nobody told me I could do that. And the meditation ended. They broke for lunch, and I sat there at the table with the tears streaming down my face, writing as fast as I could to try to capture everything that had happened in that moment. And that was in 2008. And I have done my best. And what they also said is, don't worry, we will show you where to plant your feet and we will give you the words to speak. Now, there have been plenty of times over the last 16 years that I felt like I have not known where to put my feet, nor are the right words coming. But overall, I feel like I have been guided down this path in doing my own deep healing work involving, the loss of both my parents when I was quite young, the loss of a brother to mental illness, my own sexual assaults, to be as clear a channel as I could be. Yeah. So it's continued from there.
Yeah, I'm feeling quite like I've got this feeling, like warm feeling here when you're talking, and this kind of powerful thing coming up as well. I think we're really encouraged not to tap into our intuition and our gut feeling, but I think it's really powerful. It's all the information that's come from like evolution, so it's come through your genes, but also your learning on this planet and your instincts and all of the information that you pick up without processing. So through all your senses, like you see and hear and smell and touch and all of those things, you gather information all the time, but you haven't got the capacity to process it consciously all the time because there's so much of it. There's too much information to process it. But at a level, you are processing it, and that's what your intuition is, isn't it? It's all of that information.
It's all of that, but it's also your direct connection to source, right? It's everything that you're bringing in through your senses, and that the gut feeling, or that I just know that I know, but I don't know how that I know, but I just know that I know, right? Yeah. Or words will drop in, or you'll get a take that route instead of that route, or, what call this person, right? You'll just get those kinds of things. But to do it more consistently, I have found is to open that connection to source. I would also say because I absolutely agree with everything you said, I also want to mention that it's not that we're only discouraged or not encouraged to use our intuition, but we were literally killed for using our intuition, right? There's a thing called the witch wound, and it's a witch wound for a reason. And I work with many, 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 many women, obviously, and all the people pleasing, all the not speaking up, all the not being able to set boundaries, I know I have gifts, but I'm afraid to bring them out in the world, or I don't think I have gifts. This is all the result of generations of being threatened, persecuted, and literally being killed for bringing our gifts into the world. Years ago, I opened a healing center called Spirit Matters. It's no longer open, but it was back in 2004. And before I opened it, I happened to find this thing on the internet. Now, in 2004, there wasn't a lot on the internet about law of attraction, or, it was really fairly new. And I found this thing called the Book of Destiny or something like that. And it was actually a manifestation tool, but I didn't even understand that at the time. And the first page of the book was to write your vision. And I did. And I wrote this beautiful vision about the center and helping all the people and blah, 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 blah. And the next page was to write your fears. Well, I wrote like a banshee. And when I read it, when I was finished, I was like, where the bleep did this come from? I'm terrified that I'm going to be put in stocks in the center of town and be tortured and humiliated in front of my children. I'm afraid that I'm going to be called a fraud and a charlatan, and that my reputation is going to be, and they're going to turn other women against me. I mean, it was a full-on witch wound statement. Yeah. And I didn't know about the witch wound then. I was like, what the heck is this? But that's what we have been taught through the toxic aspect of the patriarchy and the suppression and
I think we take more notice of the negatives, don't we, and the fear, because that's what's kept us alive.
Like, yes, it's absolutely hardwired in as survival. Yeah, if I speak up, I'm going to pay a price, whatever that price might be. If I let them know that I have this gift of seeing or hearing or sensing or connecting with those who have passed on. And it wasn't even all the psychic gifts. It was the medicine women. It was the herbalists. It was, midwives. Anyone who was in service, really to women, to the goddess, to the communities, the wise women, done, because you couldn't establish a power structure of either politics or religion if that existed.
It's really interesting how fearful men actually are of women's power, so that they ridicule it so much.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, not just ridicule, but they suppress it. And, well, even women do that as well.
Yeah, because we've grown up in it. Well, our mothers learned the same lessons from their mothers. From, don't speak up. Don't rock the boat. Just go along to get along. And all the power was systematically taken away when the rights to pass down. Well, back in the day, property wasn't even a thing. That was also a part. But the power to vote, the power to control our own bodies, the power to pass down our wealth or our property in the matriarchal line, all of that got turned upside down.
Even the right to speak the truth at the moment is under threat, definitely in the UK. Not sure that it's quite the same in the US, because you've got that, is it the Second Amendment?
Mm-hmm.
The freedom of speech thing. We don't have that in our constitution. No, we don't have a constitution. So it is quite difficult at the moment. So that's one of the reasons I set up the podcast, was to enable women to speak and to tell the truth, basically, however they see it. But there's, especially in universities, they're getting cancelled for speaking the truth. It's quite bad over here.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know why. I guess I had a sense that there was even sort of more freedom in Europe in some ways.
No, it's quite bad at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And, certainly, as with all laws, whether it's part of the Constitution or just, written later in law, the way they get applied and how it gets used.
Inconsistent.
Is very inconsistent, right? And that has a lot to do, again, with race and ethnicity and gender preference, so.
Since we've just had a new government come in, Labour, and since they came in, it's been really bad. There's been a prevailing sense that you couldn't speak about certain issues for a long time, like immigration and the effects of immigration on women. So yeah, there's people in prison now for writing tweets and Facebook posts, and then there's like men who are committing sexual offences who aren't in prison, and that's what we're dealing with here.
Wow.
So speaking the truth is really, really difficult.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that breaks my heart. And even though we know that this has been the way of this toxic, I want to say toxic masculinity, because I don't want it to be all men but, again, we're all, when you grow up in a patriarchal system, you take on aspects of it, and men were as impacted in different ways. I
think in some ways men have lost their masculinity and they need to get that back. So the masculinity where they are powerful and strong and protectors of women.
Right.
Yeah.
I call it the divine masculine as opposed to the egoic masculine, and the divine feminine as opposed to the egoic feminine.
Yeah.
But, we're seeing a president-elect who is nominating people for his cabinet who have histories of sexual offenses, of breaking the law. It's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
So
it's an interesting situation at the moment, isn't it?
And again, coming back to this trusting that this is all, this is the end of a system that's in its last legs, kind of gasping and grasping, right? To continue to hold on to its power and its privilege, when people are, starting to really stand up now and say enough of this.
It's still, they're still trying to repress the truth, but they can't because of the internet, and people are starting to wake up and see what's really happening, but they still want to keep this narrative going about their point of view. It's very interesting.
No one gives up power easily.
No.
Gives up power easily.
So tell us a bit more about your work and what sort of women you work with. Do they bring all kinds of different issues, or?
Yeah, well, it's been sort of switching recently because, as I said, I've been in private practice as a psychotherapist for over 30 years now. And as it works, many of the women who I work with, I think many women anyway, have some history of whether it's inappropriate sexual behavior or abandonment or abusive childhoods or whatever. So I have worked for a lot of years with a lot of really heavy and deep trauma. Some of the women have been right in the moment of it, where there's just been some kind of crisis going on. For others, it's in the past, and have been working to do the healing work around that. But just before and during COVID, I got really burnt out. I had Lyme, and then I was left with a lot of brain fog and just exhaustion from the Lyme disease. And then I got COVID very early on. Literally the day of shutdown, I was coming home on a plane from Florida, and I got sick.
Goodness.
I was sick as soon as I got home. And then I had it again, and it forced me to sort of take a step back and let a good part of my caseload go through attrition. I just couldn't do the online everyday Zoom call, client after client after client. It just wrecked me. And since then, there's really been a shift toward working more in a coaching. I do still have some therapy clients, but I'm not taking new therapy clients. I'm working more in the coaching realm now I'm being called to work with other, it doesn't have to be, but like people who want to bring their own gifts into the world in a particular way. Often it's, other coaches who have some of these witch wounds, who want to be more visible but keep getting stuck in their own process, or therapists who are looking for ways to work with clients, as I did many years ago, that would go deeper, where transformation feels more possible. And for me, the only way for real transformation is to bring spirit in, right? To bring in more of the light. It doesn't happen through conversation in your head. It needs to, happen at the level of kind of spirit and the subconscious, and working with the light and all of that. So that's really where sort of my transition is going, where I'm being guided to work not so much anymore with people who are in the depths of their sort of crisis and trauma, but who have done some of their own work already and are now looking for themselves to become leaders and teachers and helpers in this ascension process.
So I'm guessing that you attract women who are really connected to that spirituality already, who are aware of that.
Many of the women who, well, I would say almost all the people who come to me now come because they know my, kind of my history, my leaning with spirituality. I'm also an EFT practitioner, emotional freedom technique. I've been tapping since 2006, and I teach tapping, and I love it. And I integrate all kinds of other modalities into the tapping itself, whether it's, kind of inner child work. So people come, for the tapping, they come for the more spiritual aspect. Yeah.
I always loved the inner child stuff, but I couldn't get away with the tapping. I did try it, and I felt silly, and it just didn't do anything for me. So there's probably some learning in there. I should probably come back to it.
It's interesting because a lot of people have said, look, I've done it once or twice. So I went to a class, and I don't know, it just didn't feel right, or it does feel silly in the beginning. In fact, my little post, I'm teaching a class on Sunday, and the post is, why does this feel so weird? How come I feel silly doing this? What am I supposed to be doing? But I find it to be a really deep process if you can really kind of get past that and drop in. And I see amazing shifts in programming, the way someone thinks about something. Obviously I've been doing it for 16 years or 18 years, and I teach it. So I obviously,
You
think
obviously
it's
find it
pretty awesome.
powerful.
And the other thing that's exciting, and I've thought about this off and on for years, and I really didn't have the bandwidth. I didn't have the energy for it. When I took a step back, I went off all social media, whatever. I thought it was going to be for a month, and it was almost for a year. And I just completely exited from, any social media stuff or trying to create new programs or do anything. I went down to Machu Picchu for a little bit, and I just really focused on my own healing. So now I have the bandwidth, and I am in the process. I'm in the early stages of creating a membership program that's going to be based around helping women in particular develop their intuition, drop into their inner knowing, right? Bring more spirit in, and then use that in their lives, whether it's, whatever your job is, or if you're a therapist or a coach or a consultant or, energy worker, to have that as a sort of constant source of discernment and knowing in your life and in your work.
So what does that look like? Is it a course or a
workbook? The membership will be built sort of around a course. And the name of the course is Sacred Wisdom Unleashed. Okay. Let me see. We were just finalizing this yesterday. Access your intuition and activate your deepest wisdom, or something like that, or inspired guidance or something like that.
Okay, so I'll put the link to that in the notes.
Well, I don't even have it. Like, I am creating the course now, then I have to do the whole membership. So there's no link for anything for that yet, but that's kind of the way I'm going, because I want to consciously move out of having a whole practice of one-on-one clients and really build in more of this idea of community. I mentioned to you earlier on that when I first got my master's degree, it was not in anything clinical. It was in community organizing and women's issues. And this is really my roots, right? This is where I'm meant to be, building community with women around empowerment, spirituality, stepping into our role, right, as the ones who are going to take a part, step up, use their voice. I also speak light language. I do a lot of light language activation in my work. So it's going to be very much focused on, so there will be the course, and then within the membership, we'll have teaching sessions, tapping sessions, intuition development sessions, all kinds, lots of different classes to drop into within the membership, and then a library of things. So it's a lot to put together, but
is there somewhere online that people can find you if they want to look you up?
Sure. They can go right now just to my website, which is sacredheartalchemy.com. And I can send you a link, Kelly, as I mentioned earlier. For the last 7 years, this will be the 8th year. On New Year's Eve, I do a virtual burning bowl ceremony where we do some releasing and then some visioning and calling in. And I just created the link to that sign up so I can get that to you. And if it's a free event, it will be on New Year's Eve. Might be a little late but there'll be a recording if people sign up, because it's 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, which I think is 5 hours later your time. So 10:30, people might be out at their New Year's Eve celebration.
I think I'll be in bed, to be honest.
Yeah, probably. But there will be a recording. So it's a really lovely. We call in the violet flame of Saint Germain to clear all and release all of the old stuff. And then we do some visioning and writing.
It sounds lovely, actually. I think I might look it up.
Yeah. I will definitely get you the link for that, because that's great. Out there now. I just got it all out yesterday, and you're able to sign up. And as I said, it's free. It's a little little gift that I give my community every year.
Yeah, it sounds lovely. So, Catherine, thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. It was lovely to have you.
Yes, thank you. I sort of came on not knowing where we would go or what to expect.
Well, it happens.
Yeah. We touched on a lot of really very important things, I think. So thank you for leading us there and having me on.
Thank you.